Good morning and welcome to the worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. My name is Arthur Cole, today's worship associate. On this cloudy winter morning, we welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. We hope that here you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love. We have a few announcements. On Sunday, January 28th, that is next Sunday, Sunday in a week, we'll have our annual congregational meeting starting at 12 noon. It is very important that all members attend the meeting in person, as the following items will be presented and or voted on: committee reports, treasurer's report, and the adoption of next year's budget, the 2024 budget, election of new board members and officers, other important items as determined by the board of directors. So we encourage everyone to attend next Sunday in person. Then we have an announcement from the Philosophical Society. 2024 is going to be a year in which a philosophical attitude might save your sanity. Why not hone that attitude to a fine point by participating in the Philosophical Society? We discuss the philosophy behind politics, ethics, art, science, just about any idea human beings can come up with. There is a piece of paper in your order of service on which to write down something you're interested in. Put the completed slip in the basket on the blue table. That's the one out there, I guess. Right? Okay. The Philosophical Society will find some suitable readings, and then we can all meet to discuss your topic. We enthusiastically invite all of you to our lively monthly meetings. Philosophy is recreation for your mind. Come and play. Please contact Catherine Giovanna if you're interested. Thank you. Do we have any other announcement? I didn't see any. Please note that if you have joys, concerns, sorrows, and milestones that have affected your life in recent past, and that you would like to share with the congregation, you can do so by filling out one of the slips of papers at the entrance to the sanctuary. Or by posting them in the chat box if you're watching the service online. Now is a good time to silence your mobile phones. Thank you. I invite you now to find a comfortable position, to close your eyes for a moment, and enter into the spirit of worship with the following words from the Reverend Bill Schultz. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Please join me in reading the Church's covenant, which is printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We will now light the chalice flame, symbol of our faith, to illumine this day with words by the Reverend Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem Prayer for the Earth by Harriet Kofalk, and it's inspired by the Bribri indigenous people of Costa Rica. Long ago, the ancients say, this land was free, and we shared it all with the mountains and the sea, the birds and the trees. We lived in peace. Long ago, before those others came and built fences by cutting the trees, dug mines by cutting the earth, removed her blood, the oil that lies within, formed long ago like us who lived in peace. The birds sang less without the trees. The land became dry without the birds to plant the flowers. And we too became quiet, watching our mountains die, listening for the birds that no longer flew, but still we lived in peace. What sustained us through all those years? The nights of silence and the songs of the frogs. For we know, as the ancients said, this land will again be free, and we will again share it all with the mountains and the sea, the birds and the trees, for we still live in peace, and we wish you the same, for we are all one. Please rise and body your spirit and join me in singing our opening hymn, number 27, I Am That Great and Fiery Force.
Well, good morning. Today I will be sharing a book called A Flower in the Snow. It was written by Tracy Corduroy and illustrated by Sophie Alsop. In an icy kingdom far away, there lived a little girl called Luna. Her happy smile sparkled like the snow. Luna loved to dance through the snowflakes or catch them on her tongue, or leave little tiptoe patterns everywhere. But there was one thing Luna loved more than all of these. He was big and soft and cuddly, and he was Luna's best friend, Bear. Luna and Bear belonged together like peanut butter and jelly, and everything they did together. Skating on a frozen lake, rolling giant snowballs, even catching a cold. Luna lived in an igloo, and Bear lived in a snow cave in her little garden, where one bright day, something most unusual popped up. It was a flower, a dancing yellow flower. How pretty it is, thought Bear. Then, most carefully, he picked it for someone special. Just look at its face, smiled Luna. My little sunshine flower. I've never seen anything so beautiful. I will treasure it forever. But all too soon, her flower wilted, and as the last petal fell, so Luna's sparkly smile disappeared, and nothing, not a furry headstand, not a wild roll around like a ball, not even making silly faces, nothing would bring it back. Eventually, Bear knew what he had to do to bring back Luna's smile. So away he sailed to find another sunshine flower. The next day, Luna searched everywhere for Bear. Then at last, she found a note beneath her wilted flower. It read, "Gone to find a sunshine flower. Bear, XX." From then on, every night, Luna would gaze at the moon. "Please come home tomorrow, Bear," she'd whisper. And every morning, she would rush to his cave and peep through the little window. "Bear, Bear," she'd call. But he was never there. Far, far away, Bear searched for his special gift for Luna, along dusty, windswept tracks, on through deep, dark, hot, humid jungles, down soft, grassy hillsides, and across hot, sandy deserts. But though he hunted high and low, he couldn't find a sunshine flower. Then, one crisp and twinkly night, a snowflake kissed his nose. Oh, how good it felt, so cold and light. It was time to go home to Luna. So Bear set sail once again, and tall waves tossed his boat. Through the days and nights he held on tight, until at last he landed on the icy shores of home. Bear was sad that he had no gift for Luna, but seeing her again was all that mattered. But Luna wasn't dancing through the snowflakes or making tiptoe patterns in the snow like she used to. Bear began to worry, and then he saw her. "Bear," cried Luna, "you came home." But I didn't bring your gift, Bear answered sadly. Oh, Bear, smiled Luna, you are my gift. As long as you are here with me, I'm happy. And then, taking his big, soft paw, Bear, come with me, she said. There is something very special I have to show you. When the last petal fell from the sunshine flower, some little seeds were left. So I planted one, smiled Luna, and I watered it every day, and look what grew. Another sunshine flower. And then, from her pocket, she took Bear's note and carefully unwrapped it. I've been saving these seeds to plant with you, she said. So Luna and Bear planted the seeds and cared for them each day. And before long, a sunshine meadow danced in the snow. Now, hiding among the flowers are butterflies and bees and snails and spotted ladybugs and two very best friends. We will now move on to sharing sorrows and concerns and joys.
We now dedicate time to our joys, concerns, sorrows, and milestones, a time to share with this religious community events that have affected your life in the recent past, and to speak out for those we want to hold in our thoughts. From Victoria. My friend from Alaska is visiting for a week. It's fun. We raised $198 last week for women's domestic shelter. They are very appreciative. Nice. Yeah. Then Courtney Higley, my friend Willie, is joining us from Michigan. He flies home soon, but it's been a delight to spend time with him. Thank you. And another one from Victoria. Basal cancer cells were cut off my nose last week. Stitches will come out on Wednesday. I know the feeling, I got some here. Thank you, Victoria. And I have one myself. Our grandson, Jan, in Roll, Switzerland, has been bedridden for almost 6 months now with long COVID. And he can't get up out of his bed without help. It's 19. Yeah. Do we have some in the chat box? No. Okay. We light one last candle to lift up these joys and concerns, as well as the ones that remain in the silence of our hearts.
I have two short readings this morning. And the first reading is from the book Biophilia, The Human Bond with Other Species by Edward O. Wilson. The truth is that we never conquered the world, never understood it. We only think we have control. We do not even know why we respond in certain ways to other organisms and need them in diverse ways so deeply. The prevailing myths concerning our predatory actions toward each other and the environment are obsolete and destructive. The more the mind is fathomed in its own right as an organ of survival, the greater will be the reverence for life for purely rational reasons. Natural philosophy has brought into clear relief the following paradox of human existence. The drive toward perpetual expansion or personal freedom is basic to the human spirit. But to sustain it, we need the most delicate, knowing stewardship of the living world that can be devised. Expansion and stewardship may appear at first to be conflicting goals, but they are not. The depth of the conservation ethic will be measured by the extent to which each of the two approaches to nature is used to reshape and reinforce each other. The paradox can be resolved by changing its premises into forms more suited to ultimate survival, by which I mean protection of the human spirit. And my second reading comes from the book Natural Religion, Reconnecting to the Real World by Neil Ferris. We know the life of the universe almost exclusively through our participation in the Earth's story. For all practical purposes, our morality must be an Earth-centered morality. Former U.S. Senator and Vice President Al Gore echoed that view in his book Earth in the Balance when he wrote that concern for the environment must become the central organizing principle of civilization. The Reverend Dr. David E. Bumbaugh, who, when professor at Meadville Lombard Theological School, highlighted the ethic that extends beyond the individual to the whole Earth community when he wrote, "We are driven to recognize a paradox. Our sense of separateness is ultimately an illusion. Yet our individual separateness is a consequence of the drive of the universe for differentiation and complexity. We are driven by our story to seek an ethic that respects the individual and the ground out of which the individual emerges. This implies a deep concern for ecological justice that reaches across class, racial, ethnic, even species distinctions, and embraces a vision that responds to the largest sense of self we are capable of entertaining. Such an enlarged ethical vision may yet enable us to turn from the destructive course engendered by the old subdue and conquer fantasy and become instead agents of healing and cooperation with Earth's self-governance." An offering to support the mission of this church will now be given and gratefully received. We can't say exactly when or where on earth it happened, but sometime in late 2022, a child was born, pushing the world's human population to a new milestone of over 8 billion people. According to projections from the United Nations, this likely occurred on November 15th, 2022. But as you can imagine, it is extremely difficult to be precise about such an event. It took 12 years for the human population to grow from 7 to 8 billion, and with a slowing global birth rate, it is estimated that it will take about 15 years to reach the next milestone of 9 billion, probably sometime in 2037. What we can say for certain is that the Earth is not getting any larger. So more people means more impact to the land and seas, more pressure on the planet's remaining wild spaces and wildlife, and more danger for the preservation of the biodiversity of Earth's species. There is considerable evidence that we are already living in the beginning of a sixth mass extinction in the history of life on Earth. And this time, the accelerated extinction of animals and plants was not caused by a meteor or other cataclysmic event, but by human exploitation and indifference. And sadly, most of the species that will become extinct will do so without us even realizing it. Unique forms of life that evolved alongside us and passed into history without us ever getting to know them as co-relations in the interdependent web of all existence. And even those species that remain are experiencing large declines in population size. According to the World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet report published in 2020, since 1970, the populations of almost 4,400 species of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians that they monitor have declined an average of 68%. After another study of various climate change scenarios came out several years ago, one paleontologist summed up the results by saying, "Look around you. Kill half of what you see. Or if you're feeling generous, just kill about a quarter of what you see." That's what we could be talking about. Even so-called charismatic megafauna like orcas and elephants are in decline. Species that get extra attention because of their appeal to our sense of awe and wonder. If you're some small, unattractive critter, your odds are probably much worse. Perhaps it is for the best, though, that we will never know most of the animals and plants that perish ahead of their natural time. Losing a well-known species like the northern white rhino can already cause many of us to experience profound grief. So I can't imagine extending such grief to millions of other species. It would probably overwhelm us. But we cannot dwell in our despair. It is becoming clear that we humans have a moral imperative to do something to reverse this trend, but what, if anything, can we do? Or more accurately, what, if anything, are we willing to do? And what does it say about our species that we have become such a destructive force within the community of life on Earth? Like global population, it is hard to predict, it's hard to precisely determine how much of the Earth remains wild, or at least is no longer in use by humankind, since this is constantly changing. But in a 2018 study published in the science journal Nature, the authors reported that when you exclude Antarctica, only 23% of the Earth's land area and 13% of the oceans can be considered wilderness. This represents a 10% decline over the prior 2 decades, and the trend has continued, with more than 70% of the wilderness land area now contained within just 5 countries, mostly in the high northern latitudes of North America and Asia, sub-Saharan Africa, the Amazon rainforest, and the Australian desert. And in some of the most critical areas for biodiversity, such as the Amazon and other tropical forests, the rate of deforestation and habitat destruction is even greater. At the current rate, an area of tropical forest about the size of 11 football fields is lost every minute, largely due to agricultural practices. Some studies say that all the world's tropical forests could disappear by the end of the century. If so, it would be catastrophic with respect to climate change and devastating for the human communities that depend on the forest and for the millions of species of plants and animals. And when you consider the incredibly rich variety of plant species in tropical forests, we could lose the possibility of identifying new chemical compounds that could provide revolutionary medical cures. But setting aside all of the practical impacts, it would be a moral and spiritual crisis for humankind as well. Something has to change. For roughly the last 150 years, especially in America, a small but growing number of people have recognized the need to conserve and protect wild lands and to preserve the biodiversity of life on Earth, almost always in the face of opposition by those who have profited from the status quo. Famous advocates such as John Muir, Aldo Leopold, and Rachel Carson, along with millions of scientists, government workers, and concerned citizens, have worked tirelessly to establish national parks and wildlife refuges and to pass laws such as the Endangered Species Act. This has been frustrating and extremely important work, but it is not enough. The more we learn about the intricate interspecies relationships within the Earth's many ecosystems, the more we realize the impacts we are having. The loss of a single key species can send an avalanche of devastation through a network of other species. And given our limited understanding of the complexities of these relationships and the continued encroachment of modern civilization on the natural world, it is becoming urgent that we find a way to stop the damage and begin to reverse course. The problem with many environmental efforts, even good ones, is that they are limited in the positive impacts they can have in the world. Even setting aside a few 100,000 acres for a national park can seem big, but many species need enormous tracts of land populated with thousands of other species to really thrive. This is why you see efforts like the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, which is working to establish a connected corridor of wildlands between the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Yukon wilderness, providing, as they describe on their website, conservation solutions on the scale that nature demands. This is the kind of big, bold thinking that is needed to make a difference. But unless there are many more initiatives like Yellowstone to Yukon, it will still not be sufficient. Much more is needed on the scale that nature demands. So having talked mostly about the problems at a high level, I want to speak more about two possible and promising solutions that are emerging. One is the idea known as half-Earth, proposed by the late evolutionary biologist Edward O. Wilson. And the other is the practice known as rewilding, which has already seen significant results in several parts of the world. And in doing so, I want to suggest there are important moral and spiritual implications of this work to consider. Beginning around 2002, Edward O. Wilson became increasingly alarmed by the accelerating loss of biodiversity he observed. And he proposed the radical idea, which has become known as half-Earth. As he states in his 2016 book of the same name, I propose that only by committing half of the planet's surface to nature can we hope to save the immensity of life forms that compose it. The half-Earth proposal offers a first emergency solution commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. I am convinced that only by setting aside half of the planet in reserve or more can we save the living part of the environment and achieve the stabilization required for our own survival. What Wilson envisioned was essentially a global network of efforts like Yellowstone to Yukon, combined with identifying and protecting critical wildlands around the world to preserve entire ecosystems. It would be a patchwork of wild lands, not a contiguous chunk of the planet. And he included oceans and other water ecosystems in his proposal. Through his research, he concluded that setting aside roughly half of the Earth's surface would be necessary to accomplish these goals. And though he identified specific areas that should be protected to preserve certain types of ecosystems, he readily admitted that it would require an army of scientists and a Herculean efforts to bring this idea to fruition. Recognizing the incredible complexity of Earth's myriad forms of life, Wilson saw the need for many more experts dedicated to identifying and understanding the species we don't even know yet, becoming what he described as custodians of the stories each species will tell as its biology unfolds. It is a daunting task just to inventory the Earth's millions of species, let alone to understand the intricacies of the interspecies relationships. Wilson believed it would probably take at least another couple of centuries to complete the work. As you can imagine, there's been plenty of criticism of the half-Earth proposal from several angles. Wilson pushed back strongly against those who simply dismissed the idea as impractical, as well as those who instead demonstrated a blind faith that we human beings are so brilliant that we will find technical solutions to mitigate all the problems without being forced to take such urgent, drastic action. Some have also argued that half-Earth is too concerned with a more than human world and ignores human suffering. But it is clear that Wilson was concerned with the long-term viability of all species, including human beings. Other criticism of the half-Earth proposal is that that deserves more serious consideration is that it could result in a new kind of eco-colonialism, with richer, more economically developed countries trying to impose their will on less developed countries for the good of the planet. Having disproportionately contributed to the ecological problems in the first place, do we Americans, for example, have the moral authority to say to a developing country covered in tropical forests that they must preserve their forest resources instead of exploiting them, as we have done historically? How do we balance basic human needs against preserving habitat for biodiversity in realistic and not just a philosophical level? Is it even okay for a nonprofit organization such as the Nature Conservancy to purchase large tracts of land in another country and remove them from local use through conservation easements? Even in America, there's been pushback from local residents in several states about the government and conservation groups establishing new national parks or nature preserves, land that is redesignated for conservation and often restricted from hunting or off-road vehicle use, for example. And many people, including myself, believe that some portion of the Earth's wild places should be restricted to little or no human access as true refuges for wildlife to recover. Just imagine the local reaction if, say, a third of Yellowstone National Park were restricted from any human use. But if you think that setting aside half of the Earth is unrealistic, consider that there is already a partnership between the Wyss Foundation, funded by the Swiss billionaire Hans-Georg Wyss, together with the National Geographic Society, the Nature Conservancy, and the Argentinian conservation group Fundación Flora y Fauna, that is using $1 billion that Wyss already donated toward the goal of protecting 30% of the Earth by 2030. With enough political will and money, I believe the land part of half Earth might be achieved by the end of this century. And water conservation will be more difficult than land acquisitions, though, because it requires international treaty negotiations and the often controversial issues that arise with fisheries management. We don't even get along well with Canada when it comes to fishing rights. The other solution that is already paying off in many parts of the world is the practice of rewilding. Rewilding can be both a natural phenomenon and one that happens through extensive human intervention. If you visit the Great Smoky Mountains National Park or any other wild places in the Appalachians today, for example, you will see spectacular forests with an incredible diversity of plant and animal life. But less than a century ago, many of these places were farms or were logged over and reduced to barren landscapes with eroding soils. Thanks to the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s and the natural recovery that began as soon as the human presence was gone, the forest we now see look primeval and lush. It is true that the largest old-growth trees are few in number, scattered in pockets throughout the eastern states, and there are once dominant species that are now missing, such as the American chestnut, which was decimated by an invasive blight. But the diversity has largely recovered naturally. Elk have been reintroduced to the Smokies, and even mountain lions seem to be returning to the wildest forest areas. Current conservation efforts in the East are mostly focused on removing invasive species that came along with European settlement. Nature is remarkably resilient when left alone, and you see this even in places like the area around the Chernobyl nuclear disaster and in the Korean demilitarized zone. But in some places, nature needs a helping hand, and time is critical for preserving threatened species. In such cases, planting trees and other native plant species can transform landscapes with incredible results as sooner than we imagine. There's an old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And though 20 years can seem like a long time, it is not even the blink of an eye in geological time. You can Google rewilding and see many good examples only a few decades old. And it may be hard to see on the cover of your order of service because we seem to be running out of ink in our printer, but there's an example there of a picture from Scotland showing the transformation of a Scottish glen in only 23 years. From a barren grassland caused by the overgrazing of sheep and deer to a more natural state of diverse native trees and other plants. This was accomplished by human intervention in the form of planting and fencing off areas to prevent grazing. In many places, such as Yellowstone, scientists are seeing remarkable ecosystem-level recovery when the balance of native plants, predators, and prey are restored. It is exciting to think of the possibilities for conservation that could be achieved if we set aside the lands and wild species that wild species need to flourish, combined with the efforts to rewild and restore the places that need our help. Climate change will continue to present a host of challenges, but such conservation initiatives will mitigate those impacts as well. The technology for rewilding the earth already exists. It is a moral choice, not a technical problem to solve. It seems hard to imagine that much progress will be made with wars raging in many parts of the world and with the rise of frightening authoritarian politics here and abroad. But things are already happening. It may take a cataclysm to push the world to take more urgent action, and some have suggested that capitalism and the current global economic system must be radically changed or abandoned if we are to have any hope of success. Activists such as Naomi Klein rightly point out the role that our corporate capitalist system has played in creating the ecological crises we now face. Troy Vitesse and David Pendergrass have even proposed an idea called half-Earth socialism that proposes to combine the half-Earth idea with a radical restructuring of society for a sustainable future. Even the authors admit that this is a bit of a utopian idealism that is hard to imagine coming to fruition in its entirety. But many of their suggestions could be achieved even with the current global politics if there is enough public pressure. And though it is hard for human beings to do, we need to start thinking about ecological solutions like Half Earth and rewilding in longer terms, decades, if not centuries. As Aldo Leopold said, we must learn to think like a mountain, to develop a deeper ecological perspective. A human lifespan may seem relatively brief in the grand scheme of things, but each generation must make moral decisions that ripple through the ages. The more we connect with our ecological selves, the more we allow ourselves to feel and appreciate our embeddedness in the Earth's web of life, the better off all Earth's creatures will be. When we begin to see the plants and animals as our relations in a way that indigenous people have done for tens of thousands of years, as life forms who co-evolved with us and share this remarkable planet, the better off we will be. Awakening to the need to preserve biodiversity and to rewild the damaged places is a rewilding of our soul. I want to close with a passage from Edward O. Wilson's book, Half Earth, that drives this message home. Only a major shift in moral reasoning, with greater commitment given to the rest of life, can meet this greatest challenge of the century. Wildlands are our birthplace. Our civilizations were built from them. Our food and most of our dwellings and vehicles were derived from them. Our gods lived in their midst. Nature in the wildlands is the birthright of everyone on Earth. The millions of species we have allowed to survive there but continue to threaten are our phylogenetic kin. Their long-term history is our long-term history. Despite all our pretense and fantasies, we always have been and will remain a biological species tied to this biological world. Millions of years of evolution are indelibly encoded in our genes. History without the wildlands is no history at all. I invite you again to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 175, We Celebrate the Web of Life.
We celebrate the web of life, its magnitude we sing, for we can see divinity in every living thing, a fragment of the perfect whole in cactus and in quail, as much in tiny barnacle as in the great blue whale. Of ancient streams we are the sum, our bones link stone to star, and bind our future worlds to come with worlds that were and are. Respect the water, land, and air which gave all creatures birth. Protect the lives of all that share the glory of the earth.
Our closing words come from a letter from Wallace Stegner to the Wildland Research Center at the University of California, dated December 3rd, 1960. Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed. If we permit the last virgin forest to be turned into comic books and plastic cigarette cases, if we drive the few remaining members of the wild species into zoos or to extinction, if we pollute the last clean air and dirty the last clean streams and push our paved roads through the last of the silence, so that never again will Americans be free in their own country from the noise, the exhaust, the stinks of human and automotive waste. And so that never again can we have the chance to see ourselves single, separate, vertical, and individual in the world, part of the environment of trees and rocks and soil, brother to the other animals, part of the natural world, and competent to belong in it.
Please join me in reading the words for the extinguishing of our chalice flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we are together again. Please join us for conversation and beverages downstairs in Fellowship Hall. See you there.